Hey, this is Ozzy, productivity coach for the La Quinta Market Center. And today I wanted to go over compliance. Compliance is something that we need to do anytime we essentially have any contracts, right? So for a listing agreement or a buyer broker agreement, most of us are going to be looking at it when we're in escrow also, right? So let's start off by, first of all, talking about what it is. So compliance is essentially providing the information for the broker, since the broker has oversight, so that they could see what's going on and pretty much check off on the forms that we need for the file and give us the okay. We need to submit this information into compliance in order for us to get paid, right? So at the end of the transaction or at the end of the escrow, our file needs to be complete and checked off by compliance in order for us to get that check. So let's start off by talking about a checklist that we already have through our market center, right? So I'm going to show you guys this here. This is the checklist. Now, this checklist is for a sales file checklist for a residential from 1 to 4 units. So as we know, that's typically what most of us are selling, right? Single family, 1 to 4 unit single family home. We have other compliance checklists for vacant land or for manufactured homes, stuff like that. So this is the most common one. So we're going to go over this one, but I'll show you where to find these. So let's start off by figuring out where do we find this specific checklist, right? So this checklist, there's 2 different ways we can look at it. The easiest way right now that we use now is just by going into our onwardwithkw.com. So onwardwithkw.com is our website resource for all of our Keller Williams agents within the Hilgenberg group, right? So let's wait for this to load. And there you go. All right. So now once we're into this website, what we want to do is we want to go in here and look for our checklist, right? Checklist really should be very similar within all market centers, but let's just go ahead and click on KW Forms. I believe it should be here under resources link, KW Forms. And it's coming up. So while this comes up, just so for general knowledge, we have a checklist, and this checklist tries to cover everything that's going to be needed. However, what you'll discover is that you might not need all of these for your specific transaction. So let me pull that checklist, and then we'll kind of go through it. And then once we go through it, we're going to go into KW Command and show you where the files are uploaded for command, right? So here we have 2 files. KW Forms are going to be the forms that are specific to our market center. So we have our Keller Williams affiliated business advisory. We have other KW forms like broker duty, vendor, a few others on there. But let's go into KW checklist. And let's open up the residential 1 to 4 units, which is the most common one for most of us. Anybody selling just a single family home or a condo would be using this one there. Okay, so now we have to look for the one that we need, which is here under KW residential 1 to 4 units. So let's open this up and take a quick look. There is a few sections within the checklist, so we'll kind of cover those. And some of these sections you'll see under KW Command when you're uploading those files, right? Because there's different folders in a sense or files that need to be uploaded based on whatever you're doing. Let me see if I could zoom in here. I probably can't. Let me download it and see if I could. There you go. See if I could open this one up. Open, done. That way I can zoom in because the writing is small. I know that. And typically when I start recording these videos, for some reason, when I'm recording this, my internet goes slower. So FYI, that's why. The screen, the waiting for the uploading, all that stuff takes a little longer. Okay, here we go. Perfect. So this is what we want to see. So this is our checklist. The way normally I would work it is normally I would have the sheet and then I would write into it. I would put notes. I would cross out things that I already have in there. But let's just kind of go over it right now. So normally I would put the address on here, and then this would be my form for the file that I was working, right? So if we look at here, the first review on here is for listings. So this is the first review, listing review. So you must submit these items within 72 hours of taking the listing. So if you have to submit these items within 72 hours of taking a listing, then in my opinion, the best thing to do is to make sure that when you're going out there to take a listing, you have all these items covered, or at least use this checklist to understand what you're going to need. So I'm just going to go briefly here on the first item, authority documents. These are documents that are required if there's a power of attorney, if the property is in a trust, or it's a corporation or an LLC, or if it's in a probate, right? So these documents are documents that you would upload on there and you would check it off here. Now, what if it's just a regular person with just their name on the property profile? They don't have any of these documents of authority because they don't need them. Well, that's when you just cross it off. You don't need it for this file because they don't have a trust, they don't have a power of attorney, it's not a corporation or an LLC, and it's not a probate. So you cross that off and you move on to the next one. Affiliated business arrangement disclosure. This is needed, and that you're going to find under that Google form that showed KW Forms. So there you have the affiliated business. So then you print it out, have the seller sign because this is a listing, and once you have it signed, you check it off and you upload it into compliance. We'll go over uploading shortly. From there, you move on to the next form. Some of these are already part of the listing agreement. So the AD, which is agency disclosure, the PRBS, which is possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, and then the residential listing agreement, they're all, when you print it out, they're all together. So FYI, but it actually helps you make sure that AD is signed already by the sellers, the PRBS is signed by the sellers, and then the RLA is signed, obviously, right? One thing that compliance looks at whenever you submit those forms is to make sure that all the places where that need to be signed are signed, all the places that need to be initialed are initialed. So FYI, and that will come. They will check for, in this case, if it's a listing, make sure that the seller has signed, but also make sure that you had signed, right? So they're going to go in there and see where the agent was supposed to sign and make sure that you signed also. If the signatures are not there and you submitted that to compliance, they're going to reject it and put a note on there, missing initial on page 8 for seller, or missing your signature on page 10, whatever it is, right? Actually, this is a listing agreement, page 5. But you get the point. The point is that's what compliance checks for. But you start checking these off whenever, typically once you submit the form and they accept it, that's when I normally check it off. On here, you have MLS printout showing active status, or if you're not going to put it in the MLS right away, then you need to have your seller instructions to exclude from MLS. From there, if applicable, you'll see on some of these that says if applicable, form for short sale information. So if this is a short sale, make sure it's that form is there. But most of the time, I just cross it off because I'm not dealing with a short sale, right? KW, seller acknowledgement for scope of broker duty and acknowledgement of duty to protect. These are two KW forms also that you could find on that Google Drive. Disclosure information advisory. So the DIA, you find it on zip forms, pull it up, and it comes and get it signed by the seller. And then lastly, the CCPA, that one automatically already is added to the RLA. So, but just make sure that you have all these forms when you're taking the listing, and then within 72 hours, you want to make sure you upload them. What if you're working with the buyer, you're not working with the seller? Well, that's when I grab this form and I cross this whole thing off because I don't need that because I'm working with the buyer. So if you're working with a buyer, then you move from section 2 all the way down to the bottom and then go through the ones that you need, and the ones that you don't need are not going to be needing for this file, you cross off. Now, if you have a seller and you're on the listing side and you opened an escrow, then you are going to have this already filled in because you already submitted your information for the listing. And then once you're in escrow, you're also going to start to this list. So that's the only difference, right? If you're working with the listing, you're going to be really going over the whole list itself and checking off those things you need and don't need. If you're working with a buyer and you're in escrow, then you just cross off this top portion and then you just work from the bottom. From that section to the bottom, right? So that's essentially what you need. Once you open escrow, I'll just cover this one real quickly. But once you open escrow, typically these are the forms that are needed within 72 hours of acceptance. Sometimes some of these items might not get to you right away, so you need to ask for them. Example would be like escrow receipt of earnest money deposit. Typically on the RPA is 3 days after acceptance, your buyers deposit the earnest money deposit. However, sometimes it takes the escrow company longer to give you the copies. But FYI, you do want to really try to hit the 72-hour deadline. But those forms you're going to need afterwards are going to be the wire fraud advisory, KW advisories, local disclosures, if any. So if there's any, if there isn't, then you cross them off. If it's a condo or an HOA, then you're going to need the buyer homeowner association advisory. But if it's not, if it's just a single family home, then you don't need it. Or if it's a single family home in an HOA, then you're going to need it. Market center conditions, property profile. This one you pull from your Orange Coast title, or you could pull it from the MLS nowadays and just print it out and you're going to submit it in there. Agency disclosure for the buyer. So now, if you're working with the buyer, you're going to have that. But let's just say you're working with the seller, you're still going to request that. If you're with the seller, you want to have that into your file. If KW agent represents buyer, and it tells you on here, we're going to need the PRBS, the affiliated business arrangement, also signed by the buyer. If applicable, that's the buyer representation agreement, which it should be applicable. Anytime you're working with a buyer, you should always have one. If you're working with the listing with the seller and you don't have the buyer, then you don't need it, right? But if you have a buyer and you're in escrow, you definitely want to have a BRE anytime you're out there showing property anyway. So you should have it on there, but if applicable. Form RPA, which is the actual offer itself, and anything that any counters that came from that. So just be aware. So RPA is on here, and then an MLS printout, including private remarks and confirming the commission and the time of submission of offer. So you want, anytime you're submitting an offer, you want to go into the MLS and print that MLS printout where it shows the commission. That way an agent doesn't go back and change the commission or anything else is changed. You want to see what was being advertised on the MLS the moment you submitted the offer. So just be aware of that. You could always go in and print to PDF and just save it into your computer. A lot of these things you could do that way. Some of these, some of the other stuff, obviously, you need to get signatures, right? Let's continue on. So all counters are going to be on there. If applicable, if applicable. So all of these only if they apply. So if there's a seller in possession, meaning the seller's going to stay after the 30 days, actually stay under 30 days after the closing. Tenant in possession, if it's a tenant, if it's a short sale, you need to have that. If it's an REO, you need to have that. Now this is a new form, wildfire advisory. Okay. Escrow receipt of earnest money deposit. You asked that from escrow. If applicable, a copy of the entry in the trust log. We should not be handling money. That one should always be crossed off. You really should not be handling money. Offer and counter offers from other prospective buyers. That is, if you're working with the seller, you need to also upload all those other offers that were sent in that the seller rejected. So those go into the file. If you use the summary of multiple offers, then you put it on here. If you didn't, then that's it. And then any other addendas that are part of this will go on here. That's your first thing here. And then it tells you on here, please input your green sheet online at kw.com or submit to MCA. Nowadays, we are using commissions on command, but essentially, anytime you open an escrow, you want to go in there and immediately submit your green sheet or commissions. That way you get paid. And also the Market Center has visibility and knows that you have an open escrow. Otherwise, Market Center wouldn't know, really, right? From there, you move on to the next ones. And from there, anything that applies goes on there. Normally, when I'm working the file, I'm going line by line and then finding out if I need it or if I don't need it, right? And that's just as simple as that. From there, once your escrow has closed, this is the last item that goes in there, right? So, because normally these are the last signatures that you obtain when you're closing escrow. So the verification of property, any copies of all key emails, correspondence, any text messages, any communication, everything you want to memorialize, you could save it and then PDF it or convert it into a PDF and then upload it to the file. All this stuff, compliance is the way that the broker is able to protect you if something was to go wrong, or if 6 months later, a year later, somebody comes back and tries to make a claim on something. By that time, we're going to forget or have erased some of those text messages. That's why it's great to save them, convert them to a PDF, and then upload them. There's apps nowadays on your iPhone or Android that will do that. So be aware. Try to save your communications. Try to memorialize everything on an email, as Keith would always say, right? Keith would always say. Closing statement from escrow, that's at the end of escrow. And then MLS printout showing that the property was sold. This is what they go by to get paid. So this is our checklist. Now, let me show you how you start uploading these things into Command for compliance. And then lastly, I'll show you how to do the green sheet / commission, right? So let's go into Command. Let's start from there. All right. And as you're going along and you're uploading this stuff into Command, the compliance department will approve or deny any of these forms based on if it's missing signatures or initials, like I said before, or if it's the right document or not. They always will typically let you know what was wrong with the submission so that you could resubmit it the right way or with the right information. Okay, so here we are. We are in Command. And now we're going to go into opportunities. The compliance part of Command is where actually the compliance part is in the opportunities section of Command. So let's click on this. Looks like it's frozen. It looks like I'm freezing. Hold on here. All right. All right. So I'm actually going to shoot another video on the compliance part because this is too long already, and for some reason the command was acting up. So anyways, see you in the other video on compliance and how to submit your file into compliance.